Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
All right, I have Jordan here with me, who has agreed to allow me to work with her as a literacy coach. Jordan, I observed you on the 10th of March, which was earlier this week. And when I observed you for about a half hour, and it was all small group work.
Right.
I want to first go over what I saw. So I saw that you have 4 groups. In those 4 groups, you have a small group that works with you individually.
Mm-hmm.
You have a group that does individual reading by themselves, and maybe it looked like they may have partner read as well.
They partnered together.
A group working on the computers. It looked like they were doing some AR, maybe some other programs, as well as a group working on worksheets. Looked like spelling, fill in the blanks with word banks.
Right.
Excellent. Now, with each group, I had some questions about the lessons.
Okay.
With each group in your groups, were there particular objectives within each group that you had set? And if you did, what were those?
Okay. In the Independent Reading Center, the objective is just to build fluency by reading alone, and there's several books to choose from, so they know where to choose from their level. And then children that struggle with fluency, because you were observing that have quite a few in here, they often partner up so that they can still read a book and still take an AR quiz, because that's the program that we just started. So
Okay.
those are the objectives of the independent group for reading. The computer group, that's just to build technology skills. In first grade, we're supposed to be working on some typing, click and drag, and plus it also has lots of phonics games and short books that they can read on those programs that they're working on for the computer group. And then as far as the independent activities, those rotate out and change every once in a while, but what they were working on when you observed them was spelling puzzles, just so that they could work on that Magic E pattern. That was the objective for that day. That's our spelling pattern this week, Magic E long A. And just to work independently, that's something they're supposed to be doing on their own. So.
Okay, and that particular day with you, it seemed most of your groups were working vocabulary.
Yes.
Is that correct, with map skills?
Map skills. Yes.
Okay, excellent. So you're kind of integrating 2 different subjects in with
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
And then your lower group was working on just the very basics of working, reading, decoding small words, the CVC words, sight words, you said. Okay, excellent. Now you said with the one question I had with the independent reading group,
Right.
they're working on fluency and they have books that they know of what they're supposed to read. So they just don't go to the bookshelves and choose any book and just kind of.
Well, some of them do. They're not supposed to do that, but most of the books that I have over there. There's some exceptions, but most of them are first grade level, maybe a little higher, and then some are lower. Some are
Okay.
kindergarten groups. So they've had enough time now to kind of explore. I do let them explore in the beginning of the year, but they've had enough time to explore now where they know which books are appropriate, and they're usually pretty good about picking those, because those are the ones they know they can take the AR quizzes on. If they go too advanced, they're not going to be able to understand any of what's
Absolutely.
in there. So.
Absolutely. Now, do you have any concerns or questions, rather, that you get from students within any of your particular groups
Well,
that arise?
where we've just started AR, I get a lot of questions with that, because the login's a little bit different and a little tricky, and I didn't put it on their card, and I did that on purpose because I want them to learn it and memorize it.
Yeah.
So they're still having a little difficulty with that and navigating the website, because it's still so new. So a lot of times I'm having kids still ask me about that, which causes interruptions here and there. As far as the other computer programs and anything else I ask them to do, they're pretty much in the routine of they should know what to do. That doesn't mean that always happens, but they should be pretty comfortable. So those are the main issues right now that we're kind of trying to work out. So.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Well, I thought it looked like a very productive lesson. When I was, kind of watching and looking around, it seems like most of the students stayed on task. The independent reading group they kind of talk a little bit, but you have that when you set them out on their own.
Yeah.
Now, as I go group from group, I'll talk of what I saw. The teacher-led group, I was very impressed with the maps, and that was, when you think of coming in and observing reading groups, you don't always think of literacy groups, and I think you've really done a good job of making it a literacy group activities rather than just solely reading. They're working on spelling, and they're working on map skills, and doing a lot of activities like that. So I really enjoyed watching your groups. And like I said, the independent reading group, they all seem to be on task. You know, they're kind of chatty, but
And I don't tell them, to be honest, you know, if that was something that we could work on, that's somewhat my fault. But I don't always tell them that they have to be extremely quiet, because like I told you, they're allowed to partner up and read. I like them to discuss what they're reading. If they're out of hand or off task, that's when, you know, and luckily it's right here so I can
Yeah.
monitor it usually. But yeah, like you said, I mean, if they're having conversations about their books, and a lot of times they are, I think that's a good
absolutely.
skill to have.
Well, and thinking back as I watched, you know, their conversations, they were pointing at their books and they were kind of maybe laughing at something that they read. I noticed one of the boys had a Dr. Seuss book, so you know those are all entertaining
They like
books
this,
for
yeah.
them.
They like this.
So you know, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but I see what you're saying. It's really good to talk about what they're reading
And at this age level, you gotta give a little.
Yeah,
and
you've
that
gotta
can't
give
be
and take, you
perfectly
know, first
silent
grade
in every
is-
group. Yeah, exactly.
absolutely. Computer groups. I talked to a couple students. They're very excited about the AR. Their stars that they get for different levels and their magnets that they get for their different point systems. They all seem to be very, very excited. What other programs do they do within their computer groups?
Okay, they do a program called Destination, and even though now we're getting into the Common Core and we're not necessarily using everything from our Harcourt series, we still do use some stories from there, and the phonics skills are still there. So Destination's aligned with the skills that go along with that series, so that it's still relevant, and it offers games and phonics activities and short books to read. And then we have Starfall Web, where they can kind of individualize what they're doing, but that also has short stories, songs, videos for certain vowel patterns, and so that's probably the more entertaining of the two, and they like that one a lot. And then AR is the third thing that they do over at the computer group.
Excellent. So they still, even within the computers, get a well-rounded literacy.
Yeah, and they get a choice, and
yeah.
I think that's nice, because they, you know, that makes them feel a little more independent, having the choice of what they can pick, and it's still all reading, you know, as long as they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. And AR, and you said Starfall, right?
Starfall, yeah.
Starfall.
Starfall Web.
Okay. So they get a choice there, and that's good for them. And then finally, you have your independent workstation where the students, I guess, day by day, or maybe sometimes the day's work carries on into a second
Yeah, usually
day.
every 2 days maybe. I give them usually 2 days to complete an activity, depending on how long I think it's going to take, because they only have about 15 to 20 minutes. So yeah, usually every 2 days I maybe switch the activity, and a lot of times it's focused on phonics, or it's a carryover from something we did in whole group reading. You know, maybe we were doing sequencing, or maybe we were doing, like you were saying with map skills this week, they completed a map one day, so it might be something that carries over from the whole group lessons.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Now I did see as we moved around in the centers, or groups rather, you call them groups, a very significant difference between the first group that was with you that was doing map skills, and then the second group that came through. It was a very drastic change for you. You switched to decodable books.
Right.
So groups are obviously tiered by ability.
Yeah, and right now I have a group that I would say is on level, maybe slightly above a first grade level, and I have about 6 kids in that group. And then I have 2 groups made up of 7, and those groups are what I would call strategic. They're all about on the same level, but one is more, I would say, mid to on level, and then the other one would be maybe mid to low. So they're still tiered, but they're the 2 closest groups, the ones that are in the middle. And then the 4th group is the one that you saw that is pretty low. We're still working on kindergarten skills, and they came in not knowing their letters and sounds, so that's where we started, and that's why we're working on the basics right now. So
Okay, so for the top 3 groups, tiered groups, they pretty much have slight differentiation between
yeah, the
activities.
2 middle groups will often do the same story or the same set of skills, and sometimes they'll do what the high group's doing, but usually they are doing the same activity. The high group's doing something different that's usually focused more on vocabulary, because they're much more fluent, and then the low group is often doing you know, CVC words, like I told you, and sight words, and just kind of basic skills that we really have to, you know, have that structure in place to hopefully gain some fluency. So usually between all 4 groups, I'd say I have maybe 3 different activities planned.
Okay. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, and they might
It's
have
a lot of
well,
work.
they might have the same theme. I just have to scaffold
Yeah,
them to
absolutely.
where they are.
One, scaffolding's a great tool to use.
Yeah.
Now, I did notice one thing with on the transition from the low group moving from independent work group. I don't know, it was a couple of days ago if you remember. We had a couple of students straggling to make the transition.
Yeah.
Is that something that's common with that group, or is that something that happens with a lot of the groups? Just
Really, I'd say with all of the groups, it's usually not a problem. The biggest problem is probably with that group. And it's just because if they give it an opportunity, a lot of times in that group, if they finish what they're supposed to be finishing and they've put it in their pocket, I let them get off the iPad. That's kind of like the reward for doing what you were supposed to be doing. And I always check it before they go to recess to make sure that they had actually gotten it done. And with the iPads out, especially with that group, they just are very focused
Yeah.
on. And there's a lot that goes into cleaning that up, so
Yeah.
they don't always follow directions as far as that goes. They're definitely out of the four groups, not as independent as my
Absolutely.
other ones. Yeah.
well, and that's something
And
we had
cleaning up
discussed.
included.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was something we had discussed in our pre-observation interview, that they
Right.
were definitely your concern of reading groups.
Yes.
Other than that, it seemed like the students, for the most part, were very observant inside your group as well as
Right.
the other groups, but more so.
So sorry.
No, you're fine.
But I need to leave for that meeting.
Oh,
I'm so sorry.
can you reach around and just pause that for a second?
Is this okay? I think just writing it on here is probably fine.
If you hand it to me, I can.
Oh my gosh.
That's okay.
I'm so.
It's okay.